Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Gunatitamanam Chidanandarupam Chidabhasakam Sarvagam Dhyanagamyam Munidhyeyamakasharupam Paresham Parabrahmarupam Ganesham Bhajema. Team Param Vedanta extends a warm welcome to the 69th session of Bhagavad Gita, verse by verse. Wishing you all a very happy new year. This is our first session in the calendar year 2022. Let us resolve to consolidate on our spiritual learnings in making ourselves and our surroundings manifest divinity and become an expression of God's glory. We have completed the 9th chapter and we start the 10th chapter with today's session. It's heartening to know that we have crossed the halfway mark of Bhagavad Gita verse by verse. Your active participation and patronage has kept us motivated. The Madhyama Shatakam started with Ishvara Swarupam, or the nature of God. And this topic is progressively developed by Sri Krishna in chapter 10, named as the Vibhuti Yoga, the yoga of divine manifestation. The first 5 verses will be covered this evening. Today's verses will be presented by Srimati Pallavi, Srimati Kirti, Sri Kulkarni, and Srimati Apeksha. Our revered teacher, Dr. Timmappa Hegde sir, as always, will helm together these verses with his valuable insights. This is followed with chanting by Sri Prakash Gera. Let us tune ourselves in the light of our understanding and chant along. Before that, let's listen in to a quick recap of the verses of Mundakopanishad covered in the previous session by Dr. Kiran. Dear seeker, let's be all ears to listen into the glories of the Lord as enumerated by none other than Sri Krishna himself. Over to you, Dr. Kiran, sir.
Thank you. Namaste. Hari Om. Gurubhyo Namaha. Iha Pasika. Come and see this world of Upanishads, the most enchanting and mysterious. Before that, let us, next slide please. Before that, let us study some important terminologies which will help us in unraveling this beautiful thing. Human goals are fourfold. One is Dharma, Artha, Kama, or prayers, which has its own limitations, like it has bondage and incomplete and also mixed with dukkha. So discerning people, viveki, seek moksha, the ultimate security, peace and happiness. The knowledge leading to moksha is called Brahma Vidya, or spiritual knowledge, or darshanams, and Vedanta is one of them. And we have heard many terminologies like drishta, upadrashta, etc. The value of these books can be known by pramanam, that is the source or the means of knowledge on which these darshanams are based. Upanishads are apaurusheya and therefore has highest value. And our Upanishad is from Sakshat Brahma himself, and Hangiras being our Asmadacharya, immediate one, previous one. Prameya Vichara, that is what is the subject matter, and Prayojana, what is the benefit of it. Next slide, please. Now, let us study Pramanam, or means of knowledge. We know one is Pratyaksha Pramanam, that is as we see our vision, like color, etc. And one more is Anumana, that is we infer from what we have seen from or derived from sense organ. Example, somebody says, I'm giving you 50 rupees and gives 4 10 rupee notes, then you know that it is not correct. And we have to know, very important, this Shastra is a separate pramana by itself. That is the 6th pramana it is called, and it is Swatantra pramana. That means it is independent by itself. Like, for example, our vision, we can see color, but we can't hear color. If I say I'm hearing yellow color, that means you will think I'm on drugs. And another important term is Mimamsa, that is the method of extracting the meaning. And ultimate goal we should know is Atato Brahma Jignasa. Next slide, please. It started with an important question by Maha Grihastha Shaunaka to Angiras. Kasminno Bhagavo Vignate. Oh Lord, tell me, what is that absolute truth, knowing with everything becomes known? This is a mind-boggling question. He, being a Mahagrihastha, has experienced world enough to know that Dharma, Artha, Kama does not provide ultimate happiness, and else he is seeking the ultimate. Next slide. The ultimate Mula Karanam or Mula Jagat Karanam or the Adhishtanam of this entire universe. His question itself we studied had important corollaries like the ultimate cause Karanam is Ekam, that is one alone, and it itself is substantial, and it is Nityam and Satyam. Next slide, please. So Angiras says there are two types of knowledge. One is Apara, which includes Veda Purva portion and many others like grammar, etc. And Paravidya, he says, is Aksharam, that is alphabet, which is indestructible. We studied in 8th chapter, Aksharam, Paramam, Brahma. Next slide, please. What is this Aksharam? This is a verse or mantra, words worth by hearting. Yattadra Adreshyam. Let us study the Dhiraha word first. Here, Dhiraha means Viveki, the one who sees oneness in everywhere. It is easy to find differences. I am Hindu, you are Muslim, etc. But it takes courage to see one. That is why Vardhamana is called as Mahavira, not because he conquered many kingdoms, but he conquered the self. Next, the Hadreshyam, that means which cannot be seen. Agotram, that is which has no source. Avarnam, no color. Achakshu Shotram, that is which does not have any instruments. This we have studied very important before, that it itself is an independent pramana. Agrahan, cannot be grasped. These are, it is not. Then what it is? Then it is Nityam, eternal. Vibhuhu, it appears many. Sarvagatam, all pervading. Susukshramam, that means extremely subtle, no attributes. Avyayam, never can be weakened or disintegrate. This is the real knowledge. What is that? Look, the answer is there in the background. It is Tattvam Asi, you are that. So write down this mantra, and at the end of Mundaka Upanishad, contemplate, replace Brahman by you. Then it moves on to beautiful imageries. One is the spider weaving its own web. It indicates, next slide please. It indicates that the Brahman is the intelligent and material cause itself. That is Abhinna Nimitta Karana. And one more important thing is this world has manifested from the cycle of karma and not because of God's will. And just like many plants, trees, etc. come from one earth, then Brahman itself manifests as many things in universe. And just like how hairs come from, which is a non-living thing, comes from body, the apparent insentient things also come from Brahman. Next slide, please. So, in 7 verses, he has answered the entire question asked by Shaunaka. Brahman alone appears as world, and by knowing Brahman, one can know the world. So, if 7 verses itself is so ecstatic, so don't miss this Mundaka Upanishad. If you have missed the previous one, listen to the recordings and attend. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you, Dr. Kiran, for giving us an overview of the Mundaka Upanishad we studied in the last class, and also giving us some general information that is required before we study the Upanishads itself. Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. As we begin the new year, we invoke God's blessings, the blessings of all our gurus, on our continued study of the Bhagavad Gita. As we know, we have already completed 50%. We have interspersed the study of the Upanishad at the end of each chapter. Hopefully, by the time we finish the 18th chapter, we would have studied the Mundaka Upanishad also verse by verse. So this will be a very nice blend of the Gita and the Upanishads. So you will see from the recap that you just heard that the Upanishads are not so easy to understand. It requires a different level of preparation altogether. But yet for a very sincere student, that is the source book of the wonderful Bhagavad Gita. From now on, that means we are now in the Madhyama Shatkam. The Madhyama Shatkam is a group of 6 chapters, from the 7th to the 12th. And commentators have seen a distinct pattern. And what is the pattern? The real focus is on the nature of God. In Sanskrit, it is called Ishvara Swarupa. In the earlier 6 chapters, the nature was on the individual. In the earlier 6 chapters, it was a lot about our own will. But here, if I have to achieve anything, it is possible through the grace of God. And so we are trained to be very receptive to the grace of God. The earlier sadhana was karma yoga. Right now we are focusing on upasana yoga, which is meditation on God. To meditate on God, we must know who God is. And right from the 7th chapter, the Bhagavad Gita takes a unique turn where Krishna, without any request from Arjuna, offers to introduce himself. Maya sakta manapartha yogam yunjam madashraya. Because you have surrendered to me, I will reveal to you my true nature. That's Shruno, he says. I will let you know about myself completely, samgramam. And you will get to know all that you require to know about myself. What are the aspects that you need to know? Jnanam sa vijnanam. So Krishna tries to say that there are 2 aspects about myself. One is that which can be experienced as whatever you can experience around, that is also me. And then there is something higher. There is the experiencer, the consciousness principle. So he begins to say, and this is exactly what the Upanishads also speak of, the para and apara. So what the Mundaka spoke about para and apara was given to us in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So where he says, I will teach you completely. And once you know these 2 aspects, the Purusha and the Prakriti, the consciousness and the matter aspect, Shri Krishna says there is nothing more worth knowing. This is what exactly the prepared student Shaunaka in the Mundaka goes to the teacher Angirasa very reverentially and says, "Oh Bhagwan, please give me that knowledge, knowing which everything worth knowing is known." In the 9th chapter, Krishna introduces himself in a different way. He says, I will teach you something which is extraordinary. It's a royal knowledge. And it is also a royal secret. And he says, once you know this, you will be freed from anything inauspicious. Now, with all these inputs from the Upanishads, the 7th chapter and the 9th chapter, we will now see how very progressively Krishna begins to introduce God, initially as Ekarupa, which all of us are able to relate, and all religions relate initially to God with form, which is very easy to worship, very easy to relate. But as we evolve intellectually, we will find that the form of God does not address the infinite nature of God. Slowly from this chapter onwards, we are introduced. It is right from the 7th chapter also that we will be able to see God in the world as Anita Rupa or Vishwarupa. And finally, right from the 4th verse and the 5th verse of the 7th chapter, where Shri Krishna begins to introduce the Para Prakriti, Shri Krishna introduces what is the Arupa form. The first way to understand God is as the creator. We see a wonderful creation. So there must be a nimitta karanam. There must be an intelligent being who's omniscient, who knows everything, who's omnipotent, who's all-powerful. Only such a person can create such an intelligent creation. But because I cannot see him, our Puranas and Itihasas and stories say he is there, but far away, remote. And this is what is called Paroksha. This is the initial introduction of God. But after a certain stage, certain questions will come. Now, if God has created the world, with what did he create? Initially, only God was there. There was no time, there was no space also. Even space had to be created, time had to be created. And then we understand Jagat Karanam Ishvara. God becomes the world. God manifests as the world. So in these chapters of the Vibhuti Yoga, we will be seeing God as the cause of the world. And some nice examples were given in the Mundaka Upanishad. Yata Urnanadi Shrijate Grinnate. Just like the spider creates the web from itself, God itself has become the world. Just like plants come out from the earth. All these beautiful examples were given for us to give an understanding that whatever I see and experience is the manifestation of the Vishwarupa form of the girl. Once I understand and now am sensitized to God being in the world, the need for me to go to a sacred place and stand for a long time in line and to get a fleeting glimpse of the idol now does not make that much of a relevance. I will still continue to go. I will still stand in line. I will still make my prayers. I will still bow down in reverence. But now I know the ground beneath me is as sacred. Every tree, every plant, every bird that I see is a manifestation of God. And that is what Krishna is sensitizing to. From what looked like God was nowhere or paroksha, and now God has become now here. From now on, we need to be able to see all that exists around me is God, and that consciousness principle within me, because of which I'm able to see, is also an aspect of God. And there are beautiful verses in the Bhagavad Gita like Mattaha Parataram Nanyat Kinchid Asti Dhananjaya Mai Sarvam Idam Protam Sutre Manigana Eva. Shri Krishna says, be sensitive to me in the imperceptible form. I am there everywhere. Then comes the next jump, to be able to see God as existence, to be able to see God as consciousness, to be able to see God as Atma in me, to be able to see God as Anatma around me. That means consciousness and matter together form God, but there are big differences. The consciousness in me, that conscious principle or the real me is that which never changes. Whereas my body, mind, and the world around me is constantly changing. So the one has got change and the other has no change. The one has got no form, the other has got form. One has no attributes, the other. That means matter is full of attributes. The real me is independently existent, whereas matter has a dependent existence. Consciousness is Chetana, matter is inert or achetana. This chapter is called Vibhuti Yoga. Vibhuti Yoga is a preparation for Vishwarupa Ishvara Yoga. In Vishwarupa Ishvara Yoga, I will have to strain myself to see everything as God. That means there are many unpleasant things in my experience around me. How can I be able to accept everything as God? So Krishna initially begins to see whatever is extraordinary, whatever is so brilliant. So can these be the symbols that for us to meditate and work ourselves on to sensitize us to get that Divya Chakshu, that process of divinization? And that is what we will see how Krishna introduces this chapter. The opening verse will be explained to us by Pallavi. Over to you, Pallavi.
Hari Om. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Bhuye Evo Mahabhavo Shrunu Me Paramavachaha Yateham Priyamanaya Vakshayami Hitakamaya. In this shloka, the Lord says, once again, O Arjuna, may you listen to my supreme words, which I shall tell you who are delighted, wishing your welfare. Next slide, sir. So in this verse, Arjuna is advertently listening to Krishna Bhagwan and he has made his way to Madhyama Bhakta. However, he has no more questions for Bhagwan now. In order to keep the dialogue progressing, Bhagwan himself volunteers to talk more about Ishvara Swarupam or Brahma Vidya as one of the supreme law. So Bhagwan says, He Mahabhavo Arjuna, Bhuya Eva, me Paramam Vachya Shrunu. May you once again listen to my supreme words, which are dealing with the supreme law, the nature of the God, the reason being Priyamayam Te. Hey Arjuna, you are very, very dear student to me, who wants to attain knowledge of the self. And it is very rare to get a nice student, just as Shishya are interested in good gurus. Similarly, gurus are interested in good Shishyas as well. So Hita Kamaya Vakshami means Hita Ichha. I have nothing to accomplish in this universe. Yet out of compassion for you, I'm going to teach you more. This knowledge will help you in getting liberation. Krishna has got a wonderful Shishya in Arjuna. And therefore, Krishna says, Arjuna, I'm inspired. Therefore, I'm going to continue teaching. Similar examples of great teacher and students is in Kathopanishads, Yama Dharma Raja and Nachiketa, or in Mundaka Upanishad, Maharishi Angira ji and Shaunaka. Hari Om.
Thank you, Pallavi. That is the opening verse of the 10th chapter. So here Shri Krishna is inspired by his student and he says, listen again to my Parama words, my highest statements. Now, why should he say his statements are the highest statements? Because he's talking about the nature of God. The nature of God being the highest ever. He says, listen to these words and I'm going to reveal to you, which will be certainly for your benefit. I'm going to tell you my true nature. Now, if you see, this whole chapter is extremely poetic. Poetic because it is only through poetry a person develops a new type of an emotional link, and that emotional link is bhakti or love. As you will see in the next verse, which will be explained to us by Kirti. Over to you, Kirti.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Vibhuti Yoga, verse 10.2. Name viduhu suraganaha prabhavam na maharshayaha aham adhirihi devanam maharishinam cha sarvashaha. In this verse, Sri Krishna says, neither the gods nor the great sages know my origin, because I am the origin, the source of the gods and the great sages in all respects. Sri Krishna is developing our understanding of Ishvara Swarupam or nature of God with his teachings. Sri Krishna explains his being as a mixture of two aspects, Paraprakriti and Aparaprakriti. He is the intelligent and material cause and creator of this world. Just as a spider finds the material in itself for creating the web, God or Ishvara is manifesting himself as the whole universe. With this vision, we see Sarvatra Ishvara Vishwarupa Vibhuti Darshanam. Swami Paramarthananda explains why Krishna says that the gods and the sages do not know me, because he himself is explaining that I am their cause, I am their creator. They have come much later, that is, born later. They have got a limited mind, limited intellect, limited instruments of knowledge. How can a finite mind ever know the glory of the infinite Lord? So, aham adihihi means I am the origin, karanam. I am the cause of all the devas, including Brahmaji. As described in the Puranas, when Brahmaji appears from the navel of Lord Vishnu, he sees darkness everywhere.
he does not know anything, including his own nature. As a result of his tapas, he acquires knowledge given by Vishnu, the original creator. And therefore, how can anybody talk about my glory because they themselves do not know? I am the nimitta and upadana karanam of the rishis also. It is not that I create them. In fact, I manifest as them. The Sapta Rishis are to be understood as the 7 mind-born sons, Manasaputras of Brahma. They live for a period of time known as the Manavantara. They serve as his representatives till its end, Laya, and merge back in God. Sri Krishna says, I alone know my glory in its full measure. Nobody else can know me. Therefore, Arjuna, listen to me. Swami Chinmayananda explains this more. What the Lord means by the great sages is not exactly the men of wisdom explained in mythology as a group of 7 whose names are different from text to text, starting with Bhrigu to Vasishta. The rishis are not to be considered as the men of knowledge and experience, but they are objectified representations of the subjective facts in the science of Vedanta. According to the authors of Sankhya philosophy, when the infinite comes to be seemingly identified with the total cosmic intellect, Mahat, it becomes finite, thereby develops an egocentric personality of its own, Ahankara, which is equivalent to our concept of God principle, Parameshwara. It projects out for itself its own joy transactions, a world of sense objects. These sense objects are called the 5 tanmatras. The Triguna tanmatras combine and recombine in different ways to produce the gross elements, the Panchabhutas, from whose unlimited combination everything results, including the living bodies, which are material forms living in space and time, which make up the gross universe perceived by the senses. These, Mahat, Ahankara, and the 5 tanmatras together constitute the 7 rishis personified in the Puranas under different names. The Devas do not literally mean the hosts of heaven. The word Deva arises from the root meaning to illumine, to shine. The Devas, therefore, are the sense organs which illumine for us the world of objects for innumerable experiences. It is therefore clear now that the self, the pure consciousness, is the source of all the Devas and the great rishis, meaning that the conscious principle is the substratum for both the physical and the mind-intellect life in each one of us. Even though they are thus sustaining themselves in the truth, they cannot know my origin. In short, the consciousness being the very subjective truth in us can never become the object of perception for the sense organs, or an object of feeling for the mind, or an object of knowing for the intellect. This sacred truth, discussed in the Upanishad, is condensed and hinted by the Lord here in this verse. Thank you, sir. Hari Om.
Thank you, Kirti, for giving us a very detailed interpretation, both by Swami Paramarthanandaji and Swami Chinmayanandaji, where ultimately what we need to know is everything that we see and experience has come from God. And you have given us some additional understanding of the Sapta Rishis and the Devas. So what we need to do is that everything that I see and experience, everything comes from God, And this is the teaching style where the teacher tries to kindle our interest that what I'm going to teach you is something that nobody else will know. And I am the source and I'm giving it to you directly. The third verse will be explained to us by Mr. Kulkarni. Over to you, sir.
Hari Om, Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Bhagavad Gita chapter 10, verse number 3. Yo mamajamanadincha vetti lokamaheshwaram asammuda samarteshu sarva papai pramuchyate. Next slide, sir. Next slide, please. Yo, who, mam, me, ajaha, birthless, anadim, beginningless, veti, knows, Lokamaheshwaram, Lord of all worlds, Asammudaha, undeluded, Saha, he, Marteshu, among the mortals, Sarva Papai, from all sins, Pramuchyate, is liberated or released. He who knows me as a beginningless, the unborn, and the master of words, he among the mortals becomes undeluded and he is free from all sins. Next slide, sir. Introductory verses of this chapter. Bhagavan volunteers to explain the power of Lordship, manifestation as entire universe to the beloved disciple Arjuna to strengthen devotion and dedication. Analysis of the implied meaning of the sum of the words. Marteshu means among the mortals. Swami Chinmayananda generally refers to all those who are identified with the material world. They are all Marteshu. Lord Krishna here refers to all human beings who identify themselves with a BMI complex. They will experience birth and death cycle. Veti, a knower, a true seeker, who has a clear and right understanding of the self and who is totally not deluded. Delusion means who cannot discriminate between spirit and matter, or you can say Atma or Anatma, free from illusions. Delusions, developing a power of Vivek Shakti is absolutely required. Next slide, sir. See, he understands a birthless ajaha, beginless, anadi, lokaha, lokamaheshwaraha, field of experience. As per the scriptures, there are 14 lokas. A Lord is master of all worlds. He is lokamaheshwaraha. He will be blessed with free from all sins and liberated from bondage, and he is in the path of realization. Next slide, sir. Lord Krishna here explains the divine majestics and excellences of the essential nature of the self. In this verse, the nature is described as unborn and beginningless. The world of matter is finite in nature, which experience which a beginning and end. The Atma, the self, is eternal and is not affected by 3 periods of time, past, present, and future. It is birthless. Any manifestation, delusionary or illusionary matter has a beginning and end. To enumerate some of the examples, a manifestation of the waves in the ocean has a beginning and end. A ghost born in the post can't exist when reality is known as a post. A golden deer, which is illusionary, it can't exist. When person wanders away from one's own real nature of truth, he identifies oneself with the happenings of the world and dishonoring his godly dignity and divine status. Thoughts and actions falling under the low pleasures will never allow the person to rise above and seek the higher peak of perfection. In the previous verse, the Lord clarified that no person, however great, a Maharshis and even Devatas, knows me, for I pre-exist to all of them. I am the creator and sustainer. Ahameva Adihi Lokamaheshwaraha. He is the master of all lokas. Lokamaheshwar. Ishvara is a consciousness identified with the total upadhis, and he is Sarvajna. In this context, I would like to present a meaningful and relevant verse in Kannada from Kaggamuni. Huttadiruvanu neenu, sayudiruvanu neenu, ಹುಟ್ಟು ಸಾವುಗಳ ಆಟವನ್ನು ಆಡುವನು ನೀನು, ಒಟ್ಟು ವಿಶ್ವವೇ ನೀನು ಮರಣಮುನಿಯ. See, more about Bhagavan's glory will be in the next verses. Hari Om, thank you.
Thank you, Kulkarni sir. That was a very nice explanation of verse 3, where Shri Krishna is continuing the introduction of giving us the real reason why it is so important to know the nature of God. Because once a person knows God's true nature, a person is not mistaken by all the illusions and thereby gets lost in an illusory word and miss the real one. We come to a detailed description now of the Vibhuti Yoga itself in verses 4 and 5, which will be explained to us by Apeksha. Over to you, Apeksha.
Hari Om, sir. Buddhir jnanam sammoha, shama satyam damah shama, sukham dukham bhavo bhavaha, bhayam chaha abhemev cha, ahimsaha samta tushti, tapodanam yasho yashah, bhavanti bhavaha bhutanam, matta evam prithigvidha. So here Krishna is talking about everything that we see in this world, in human beings, is born out of me. Basically, Krishna talks about there are two in this world. There's one internal world of thought and the second is external world of objects. So the 10.4 and 10.5 verse explains about the internal world of thoughts or the emotions that we see in any human being, in all the human beings in this world. Krishna says it is born out of me. Next slide, sir. So here Krishna mentions 20 qualities, 20 emotions that are seen in human being, but these emotions are not limited to these 20. We can add even more. So we will see one by one what are those emotions. Next slide, sir. Krishna points out that God alone has manifested in the form of the entire universe, because God is a mixture of consciousness plus matter. As I said, the world is divided into two. Internal world of thoughts, that is emotions. And in the upcoming verses, we are going to see external world of objects also are born out of Krishna only. Next slide, sir. So what are those 20 emotions that Krishna is talking about here? So first he says buddhi. Buddhi means intelligence. It's the ability to analyze things in their proper perspective. Second is jnanam, which is knowledge, but not the knowledge that we receive in our colleges or whatever, in schools and colleges that we say. Knowledge here means the ability to discriminate spiritual from material. Third is asamoham, which is absence of confusion or clarity of thinking. Fourth, shama, patience. Satyam, truthfulness, the ability to forgive people who have harmed us in any way. Dhamma means sense control on our sense organs. Samaha means mind control. Sukham, happiness. Dukham, unhappiness. Bhava, birth, origin of the thoughts or emotions I am. He's talking about abhava, arrival and departure of these thoughts, which is the experience of death. Bhayam, fear, emotion of fear that we see. Next slide, sir. Abhayam, fearlessness. Ahimsa, non-violence, not only in your word or action, but also in your thoughts. The mental attitude of non-violence is also very important. Samataha, poise in any situation, being equanimous in any situation. Tushti, feeling contented in whatever comes by our karma. Tapaha, these are voluntary austerities for spiritual benefit in accordance with the Vedas. Danam, the generosity and the charity that we do in our lives. Yashaha, fame, that is brought to us by our good actions or good qualities. Ayashaha, ill fame, that is we get because of our bad qualities. Next slide, sir. So how do we understand these? Like as Swami Param said, these 20 emotions Krishna is mentioning here, which basically constitutes the human nature, but there can be more if you can think about. So here's a very beautiful example which I came across. It's like a powerhouse, right? There's a powerhouse which sends electricity to all the objects that we see in the world. So that electricity in music system is manifested in sound. That same electricity is manifested as light in a bulb. That same electricity is manifested in heater as heat. So these are different emotions. These are different manifestations of electricity. Similarly, if we replace the powerhouse, the energy of God manifests in different human beings in different emotions. And that is what Krishna is saying. All these emotions, these internal world of thoughts that we can think about is born out of me. Next slide, sir. All these qualities, to summarize, all these qualities manifest in individuals to the extent sanctioned by Krishna alone, according to our Purushartha, that is the action that we have performed in our past lives, in the present as well as past lives. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Apeksha, for a nice and a quick explanation of these two verses where Krishna continues to give us very clearly that he is the cause of everything. That if he is the cause of everything, it is up to us how we utilize this power force, because he has also given us the freedom with which how we will be able to express our own freedom. In these two verses, Krishna has focused on the internal world or in the thoughts. And as you see, we have all the freedom. A negative thought can come, whether you're prepared for it or not. But then we have the ability to filter, or whether we have the ability to continue to encourage these thoughts. And that is the glory of the free will that we have. If you look into the whole of this chapter, this Vibhuti Yoga chapter, you will see Sri Krishna seems to be stretching and stretching the same idea again and again to be able to see God in and through everything. It is a method of dealing with our mind, because our mind needs to be trained, because traditionally what kind of a mind we have a kind of a proofreader's mind where we have been trained to see all that is negative. If you see a general conversation of people, each one is telling how negative their experiences were. But in this Vibhuti Yoga, the training is totally different. The ability to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, the ability to see glory in every little thing. And in such a process, we become more sensitized, and that will prepare us for the next big jump, which is Vishwarupa Ishvara Darshana. Our next class, which will be on the 7th of Jan, will be a continuation of the same process. So as I said, be prepared for this, but you will never realize when an internal change in our own thought process happens to help us to accept the Vishwarupa Ishvara Darshan, where our mind is now ready to accept everything as the will of God. We will have a chanting of all these verses that we had by Indumati. Over to you, Indumati.
Atha Dashamodhyayah Vibhuti Yogah Shri Bhagavanuvacha Bhuya eva mahabaho Shrunu me paramam vachah Yatteham priyamanaya Vakshyami hitakamyaya Name vidusuraganah Prabhavam namaharshayah अहमादिर्हि देवानां महर्षीणां च सर्वशः यो मामजमनादिं च वेत्ति लोकमहेश्वरम् असम्मूढः समर्थ्येषु सर्वपापैः प्रमुच्यते बुद्धिर्ज्ञानमसम्मोहः क्षमा सत्यं दमः शमः सुखं दुःखं भवो भावो भयं चाभयमेव च अहिंसा समता तुष्टिः तपोदानं यशो यशः भवन्ति भावा भूतानां मत्त एव पृथग्विदाः ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः.
Thank you, Indumati ji, for the wonderful chanting. We thoroughly enjoyed the melody of the shlokas blended with your Shraddha. We are grateful to Dr. Timmappa Hegde sir for being the guiding force and leading us from the front. A big thank you to all the speakers for an insightful presentation, which has given a very good start to this new chapter. Our gratitude to all of you for your active participation. God manifests as the universe, thus the whole universe is nothing but the Lord himself. Sarvam Vishnumayam Jagat. Once I'm able to appreciate this, it is Vishwarupa Darshanam, divinization of this world. There is no world separate from or other than God. Krishna wants to say that since God is everything, any glory anywhere in the creation belongs to God alone. The glory of the sun, moon, river, ocean, and everything else. Seeing all the vibhutis as God's vibhuti is vibhuti darshanam. And the greatest advantage is that it will keep us grounded and humble because we learn to never claim any credit whenever pride rises its hood. If we remember Vibhuti Yoga, we will become humble, says Swami Paramarthananda ji. My glory belongs to God, your glory belongs to God, and there's only one source of all glories. It is this transformation of seeing Sarvatra Ishvara Vibhuti Krishna wants to bring in our minds and hearts, seeing the glory of the Lord everywhere. With this vision, we close our today's session to meet in our next session on Friday, the 7th January 2022 at 6:45 p.m. Indian Standard Time. May the Guru's compassionate grace ever lead us forward on the spiritual path. A special thanks to all of you for your generous contributions towards Guru Dakshina and request to update the Google Forms whoever has not done so far. Krishnam Vande Jagat Gurum. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Hari Om.